The Arctic Sea is not a place for sentimentality. It is a landscape of bone-deep cold and absolute indifference. For men like Elias and his son, Kael, it was simply the family business. They were commercial ice fishermen in the unforgiving waters off the coast of Greenland, a region where the sun becomes a rumor for months, and the only sound is the wind dragging itself across miles of frozen ocean. We open on a scene of stark metallic blue, the blinding white of the pack ice stretching into an endless gray horizon, a sky the color of old iron. It is late January. The year doesn't much matter out here. Time is measured only by the ebb and flow of the tide beneath the colossal, fracturing sheets of ice. Elias, a man whose hands looked more like gnarled driftwood than human flesh, stood over a newly drilled hole, the diesel generator for their winch coughing a weak plume of smoke into the frigid air. He'd been fishing this same patch for 40 years, first with his own father and now with Kael, a young man who carried the heavy weight of a dying tradition. They communicated not in words, but in the practiced rhythm of labor, the thunk of the auger hitting the ice, the metallic groan of the winch, and the shared grunt as they wrestled the heavy net. Beneath them, the water was a deep, impenetrable black, a void that swallowed light and sound alike. Elias always said, "The ocean holds its breath beneath the ice." But this trip felt different. For 2 weeks, the usual bounty, cod, halibut, Arctic char, had been meager. The nets came up thin, sometimes empty, and worst of all, sometimes damaged. Not torn in a single clean rip, but shredded in a way that looked violent. Kael had pointed out the strange pattern to his father, a series of long, parallel gouges through the thick synthetic webbing. Elias, however, dismissed it with the stoicism of a man who'd seen 1,000 impossible things happen at sea. "Big teeth on a big shark," he'd grumbled, but his eyes held a flicker of doubt. The local Baffinday sharks are huge, yes, but they aren't surgical. The air that afternoon was strangely still, a heavy, suffocating silence broken only by the whine of the generator. Kael was checking the lines on the far side of their camp, a miserable little collection of canvas and rusting steel. He leaned down to clear a piece of stubborn slush from the edge of the hole when the sound hit him. It wasn't loud, not at first. It was a low-frequency hum, a vibration that didn't just register in his ears, but through the soles of his boots and up into his bones. It felt like the ice itself was singing a deep, mournful song. He straightened up, heart suddenly hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. The sound stopped instantly. "Dad," Kael called out, his voice thin in the vast emptiness. "Did you feel that?" Elias looked over, his weathered face impassive. "Feel what, boy? The cold? It's always cold." "No, a vibration. Like a motor, only deeper." Elias just spat a dark stream of tobacco juice onto the ice. "The diesel, Kael. Stop trying to find ghosts in the slush. We have lines to set." But the feeling persisted. Over the next 2 days, the vibrations returned, always brief, always originating from directly beneath the thickest part of the ice they were standing on. It was enough to make the small water surface in their fishing hole ripple, a tiny, frantic dance. The fish, which had been scarce, now vanished entirely. As if something vast had cleared the water out, the only creatures left were the 2 men, isolated on a floating fortress of ice, feeling an immense, unseen presence beneath their feet. Kael recalled the old Inuit stories his grandmother used to whisper, tales of the Kalupalik, a creature that lived under the ice and stole children who wandered too close to the water's edge, not with hands, but with an immense, suffocating current. He tried to shake the ancient dread, reminding himself it was just a myth, a way to keep children safe. Then came the 3rd night. They were hunkered down in their tent, the kerosene lantern casting long, dancing shadows. The cold was unbearable, but they had managed to find a sliver of rough comfort in their routine. 2 mugs of weak coffee, a game of worn-out cards. It was midnight when the ice cracked. Not the familiar, ambient groaning of the pack ice shifting under the current, but a sharp, terrifying crack that sounded like a rifle shot fired directly beneath their heads. Both men froze, the cards forgotten. This was close, too close. And then the thrumming returned, louder this time, a visceral roar of energy that vibrated the very steel legs of their cots. The noise was immense, powerful, and utterly inorganic. It defied any sound a natural animal should make. Elias finally moved, his face etched with a fear Kael had never seen before. He scrambled out of the tent, grabbing the heavy spotlight. Kael followed him, adrenaline burning away the cold. The light beam cut through the swirling snow, landing on the center of their camp, on the main fishing hole. The water was churning, not just bubbling, but exploding. A column of black, icy water was erupting from the hole, spraying outwards, and in the center of the column, the water was being sucked downwards again, creating a horrifying vortex. Something was moving down there, something huge, was trapped or hunting. And then for a heart-stopping moment, the water cleared just enough for them to see it. It wasn't a shark. It wasn't a whale. It was a shape, immense and impossibly elongated, a dark shadow in the churning blackness. And then a sound that cut through the roaring water and the deep thrum, the grinding of something impossibly hard against the underside of the thick pack ice. The grinding grew louder, closer, radiating through the ice sheet. It was a scraping, dragging noise that suggested vast, heavy scales or plates being pulled across the ceiling of its prison. The sheer scale of the thing was the most terrifying element. Whatever it was, the fishing hole was just a keyhole, giving a glimpse into an abyss. Elias let out a hoarse cry, a sound of pure terror. "It's trying to get out! Kael, the tools! We have to move the generator!" They scrambled in a panicked frenzy, yanking the heavy engine off the vulnerable ice. The grinding stopped, replaced by a dull thud, thud, thud beneath them, like a colossal, slow-moving heartbeat. The movement was tracking them. Kael felt a deep, existential dread. This thing didn't just want to pass by. It was following the vibrations of their camp, perhaps drawn by the heat or the noise. Suddenly, a new sound split the air. Not from below, but from the surface. A sharp, high-pitched scream of tearing metal. The immense pressure from below, where the sheer brute force of the creature had found a weakness in the surrounding ice. 50 yards away, where the ice met the open sea, the pressure ridge, the whole shelf was fracturing. A chasm was opening, a dark maw of water spitting jagged shards of ice. Elias let out a hoarse cry, a sound of pure terror. "It's trying to get out! Kael, the skidoo, now!" They leapt onto their snowmobile, its small engine sputtering to life, and began a desperate race away from the collapsing pressure ridge. Kael glanced back. In the widening gap of black water, a massive bioluminescent blue light pulsed once, twice, deep beneath the surface. It was alien, cold, and utterly malevolent. The escape was a blur of speed, terror, and the ceaseless, terrifying sound of the ice breaking apart behind them, a sound like God tearing paper. They didn't stop until they reached the distant shoreline, a 2-hour journey that they accomplished in 20 minutes, leaving everything, their camp, their gear, their entire livelihood behind. They never went back to that patch of ice. The stories they told the few people who would listen were dismissed, of course. Panic, pressure hallucinations, an underwater landslide. Elias passed away a few years later, a quiet, broken man. But Kael carries the memory, not of a monster, but of a fundamental truth learned on that desolate ice. That beneath the thin, beautiful veneer of our world, there are abyssal things, ancient and hungry, that exist not in myth, but in the crushing, lightless depths, waiting for a tremor to call them up. And once you hear the ice crack for them, you never truly feel safe on the surface again.